I'm Nathan Maharaj. This is Kobo in Conversation.
I was definitely cackling as I
Yeah.
wrote big chunks of it. The very first time I was exposed to overseas aid work was in the context of those old infomercials
Hmm.
with Alex Trebek,
Alex Trebek.
right,
Yeah.
as a celebrity.
Hosting Jeopardy. All these facts. How could this be
Yes,
anything other than
yes.
perfectly on the up and up?
Like the two things have become more and more entwined. The absurdity of that really struck me.
My guest is Sharon Bala, author of the award-winning 2018 novel, The Boat People. Her new book is called Good Guys. It's about a nearly bankrupt international aid charity called Children of the World and how they're stumbling into the good graces of an A-list celebrity raises a lot of money and a lot of questions about who the good guys really are. Sharon Bala, welcome to Kobo.
Thanks for having me on, Nathan.
It's such a delight to have you. Let's start with setting the table a bit. What is this fictional charity called Children of the World?
So, Children of a World is a fictional charity, as you said, headquartered in Toronto with projects all over the world. It was founded about 20 years or so before the book begins by a rock star, a very successful, very popular, very beloved rock star named Crispin St. Ange. He was part of a punk rock band called Resurrection. And when the band broke apart, rather than doing what his agent and manager would have wanted him to do, which is to spin off into a solo career, he decided his second act would be saving the children of the world. So he's founded this charity, and when the book opens, it's about the present day, and the charity is really on the hook. I mean, they're about to go bankrupt, as I think you said.
Yeah, yeah. They are counting every penny. There are spreadsheets
Yeah,
all in red. It's a bad time.
it's a bad time. It's a bloodbath, is the way that one character describes it early in the book.
It feels it feels drawn from life. Do you have experience in this field of nonprofits and skin of the teeth budgets?
So I had a first career in public relations and communications, and I worked in healthcare, mostly nonprofit, but so very different nonprofit than what is depicted in Good Guys. But I do have experience working in charities that sometimes had were working on shoestring budgets. And certainly I have that experience of going in, especially in my very early 20s, being quite naive and thinking this is going to be more than a job, it's going to be a vocation, I'm going to be doing good. And then once you get in there and you see how really even nonprofit, even philanthropy is sort of has to be fed through the wood chipper of capitalism and all of the compromises that you have to make, and all of the things that you are balancing, where are we getting the money from? Who is giving us this money? How did they make this money? But we need this money to fund research, to fund advocacy, to fund whatever it is we need to fund. So I do have experience seeing the inner workings of charity and those kinds of things. And it really changed the way that those early experiences really changed the way that I see any kind of nonprofit. Whenever I'm walking down the street and I see someone's last name on the wing of a hospital, I know what that means. I know that that money is not necessarily going to fund nurses or beds or keeping the lights on. I was sitting in a theater, not in Newfoundland, in a different province. And I was waiting for the play to start, and I was looking through the sponsor list at the back, just idly. And I overheard these two people, strangers, behind me, and they were talking about one of the major sponsors of this theater. And one person said to the other, "Well, he takes more than he gives."
Wow.
And I have to say, I typed that into my phone and I thought, oh, I really like this. I wonder if I could use this in the book. I couldn't really, but I get to use it now.
Yeah, yeah. So what made you want to set it in this in this area of nonprofit, of this sort of NGO global vision kind of thing?
I think I'm always really interested in a more global kind of storytelling. I'm always interested in also upping the stakes. And the stakes of charity, I think, when you're doing it in your own community, are sort of different for the people who are enacting the charity, because it's much more difficult if you make a mistake, if you screw up, if you hurt somebody and you live in that community alongside them in some way, you're going to feel the consequences of it. But also, the stakes for the person receiving the charity are maybe a little bit lower because their situation is not so dire if they live in a country like Canada, which does have some kind of a social safety net. Whereas if you, as the as for example, Crispin, the founder of Children of the World, or Luca, who's one of the country directors, who's a character in the book, if you are making decisions about people in a country which is not your home,
Mhm.
which you might only be there for a very short period of time, which you might only have parachuted into and left, the stakes for those people in those impoverished countries is much, much higher. But the stakes for you as the person enacting the charity, doing this quote unquote good, are so much lower because if you screw up, you can just leave. And we see this happening all the time in the real world. Charities, organizations that go into a place and then a word that I saw a lot is quote, deprioritize. Oh, we as the organization have decided to deprioritize this particular project, this particular country. Well, that's really easy for you to do, to deprioritize, but for the people who live there, their livelihood, their ability to feed themselves and their children, to have access to healthcare is absolutely of the utmost priority.
Yeah, and it does occur to me too that deprioritize is a big word for what actually means they're just ceasing to pay attention or
They're
invest effort.
abandoning
They're abandoning.
they're abandoning their responsibilities.
Yeah, but it's the lowest effort thing because it's a cessation of concern and action. They're not, as you say, they're not in the place. Like to say they walked away is to use an ambulatory metaphor when no one's walking anywhere because they're not there. They just stop answering the phone or cut the phone line.
Mhm.
You mentioned Luca. I want to talk about Luca in a bit, but let's start with Crispin. Crispin
Great.
Saint Ange, one of the great names, I think. In it's a beautiful name. Um,
Thank you.
he seems to be his role, as we find him in the book, seems to be to emit a reality distortion field, like wherever he goes. And some of it involves like their financial situation where Crispin enters the room and suddenly it's not so dire somehow.
Yeah.
I get a sense I'm getting he's giving Bob Geldof, he's giving Bono, but like instead of founding Band Aid or like performing at it in the 80s, he's got this like failing 21st century charity. Tell me about this character. Tell me about embedding this rock star, this second career, ill-advised action rock star as the founder of this charity.
So many of these charities that are founded by, let's say, brand name people, if I can say that, people where you know exactly who they are, they come as the result of making their money in some kind of first or um, main profession. They've done really well in IT, they've done really well in music, and then they decide this must qualify them. Being successful in one arena must qualify them for being successful in another. And the thing I really liked about Crispin was how, I mean, just absurdly optimistic he is as a person, and truly is a visionary in the sense of being able to see a vision and articulate the vision and bring people along happily, a little bit like the Pied Piper.
Mm.
But his eye is always on the prize and never really oh, there's like a line that comes late in the book. This isn't really giving anything away, but another character says to him, it's always the forest with you, isn't it? And what she means by that is you're not seeing the trees that make up the forest, and you are clear cutting your path here. And there's a lot of trees that are falling down. So I really saw him as a person who was really fixated on the big picture and couldn't see any of the small pieces that have to be in place. Um, and also the kind of person who just won't take no for an answer or won't take that can't be done for an answer. And I think in some ways that is his greatest strength, but in other ways it's also his greatest weakness. And then the other thing that was important for me when I thought about Crispin, I thought about a person with a great deal of charisma, but then I also thought about a person whose charisma comes from his ability to really, his strength is really like a psychological acuity about other people. He
Mm.
can really size a person up and figure out what it is they need from him and what it is they want from him and how to give it to them in that like one-on-one kind of way. He makes everybody feel like their own rock star, and
Mhm.
then he's able to get them to do whatever he wants them to do. I did a lot of research into con men while
Oh
I
yeah.
was working on him. Yeah, and I also did a lot of research into real charity founders, including in music and other fields. But yeah, con men was a big thing that I thought about because con men are essentially selling a pipe dream where if you
Mhm.
sat and thought about it for a minute, it wouldn't make any sense. And that is what Crispin's doing, except he has absolutely drunk his own Kool-Aid. He believes completely.
Yeah, like my charitable reading of him is he sees this work as yet another creative endeavor in his life.
Mhm.
And he's been able to succeed with creative endeavors so far. You know, he's been a successful musician. He's commanded audiences of thousands, millions. And so this seems like another thing that he thought of, and he's got a vision. There's a way to bring it together. And why shouldn't a charity work like a studio with the
Exactly.
engineer setting up the mics and the producer figuring out how we're going to put this together and manage the budget and it's he's just so naive and it's beautiful, but it's also like it's also wrong. It's so wrong.
It's it's that combination of naivety and intense hubris,
Hmm.
and then also lots of great intention. And then the other thing about Crispin that was interesting to me is when I started to think about his backstory. I always like to think about character backstories. When I thought about who he was and where this came from, to me, it felt important that one of the things that really propels him in all of his work is that he was raised in a very evangelical church and in a family in particular, a family culture that believed very strongly in equity of assets
You-
and in we should not have anything more than anybody else in the world. And so this is the family that really gave a lot of their money away to charity and was very involved in missionary work through their church, very involved in funding missionary work through their church. So that idea of missionaries as the original rock star celebrity in his mind really looms large.
we spent a lot of time talking about Crispin. This isn't really his story. He's kind of
No,
a secondary character. The first employee we meet of Children of the World is actually Luca de Silva. He does not seem to share the vision of the folks back at
no.
HQ. He sees no forest. He sees only trees. Why introduce us to him before any of the other characters in this organization?
Oh, that's a good question. That's not the way the book began in earlier drafts, but at some point I realized I had to begin in Santa Rosa, in this fictional Central American country, which is one of the places where Children of the World is doing their overseas work. And Luca is the country director. So he has been hired by head office and lives there in Santa Rosa among the employees and among the people they help. Um, and the children, and he's been there for a couple of years. And unlike Crispin, Luca has spent his entire career, he's about 40 now, he spent his entire career working in as a humanitarian and working on the ground in all these different places around the world, only seeing trees and being completely divorced from head office and their grand visions. And like, he doesn't know what a mission statement is. I gave him like a, almost in some ways, an ideal worker's life because he doesn't know and he doesn't care about strategic plans or jargon or any of this stuff. He's just there to actually be boots on the ground and do the work. And in this role that he's taken at Children of the World, it's a bit of a change for him where he is the country director and he is suddenly unwillingly responsible for things like budget and numbers and head office, kind of harassing him about, we need to have more placements for employees. And he's saying, I need to hire more nurses. The clinic here is going to mutiny against us. And, head office is saying, but we don't need nurses because we have these volunteers coming down and doing free work. And Luca's saying, okay, but the volunteers don't speak Spanish. So actually, they're not very helpful. And he's kind of in between this being pulled in these two directions. And I thought that was interesting.
He's I don't want his job. I don't want anything to do with his work. It's such a tough spot. Everyone looks to him. And also there's a lot of like kind of seeing through him because they know
Yes.
Luca can't make promises. Luca has no power. Everyone under him knows
Hmm.
all he can do is keep them employed until head office has cut a budget, then they're gone. But that's all he is so terribly cynical. Um but he comes to play because he's on the ground when the charity gets connected with with this movie star all of a sudden. And this is through yet another character, through Claire. And I mean, something that occurred to me about Claire as you were talking about Crispin was that um, in Crispin's first career as a rock star, he inspired Claire to go into this work. And now Claire finds herself reporting under this guy and who can't really make it happen. But let's talk a bit about Claire. Let's talk about that role and what she does for the company. Sets things in motion.
Yes, I do like to write books from multiple perspectives. And so one of the voices you hear is Claire, and you get part of the story through her perspective. She is a lifelong public relations specialist, and specifically, she's worked at an agency for most of her career. She's about 40, same age as Luca, about 10 years younger, 10, 15 years younger than Crispin. And as you said, she was a fan. She was a big fan of Crispin and his band, and he did unwittingly, unintentionally inspire her to end up working for him. But before that, she had a whole career working in reputation management, we could call it, where people and companies who got into big trouble publicly would come to her agency and come to her specifically, and she would make their troubles go away and launder their reputations and find ways to really make them look squeaky clean in the public eye. And she did this very successfully for 20 years before her conscience started to scream a little too loudly. And so when the book begins, she is the newest employee at Children of the World, and she has come here taking a huge cut in salary. So at great personal sacrifice, she's come here to really do something good with her skill set. And she's very committed to the work. And what is perhaps less obvious to her, but I think will be very obvious to the reader, is really she's here to clean her own conscience, to launder her own dirty conscience. And that is really motivating her to save the charity financially. And one of the things she does is that she catches the eye of this A-list Hollywood celebrity who has a lot of money and a lot of clout and many, many fans online. And the celebrity's name is Dallas Hayden. She's like, a young up and coming actor, singer, dancer, triple threat. And Claire convinces Dallas to go and do a volunteer stint in Santa Rosa. And Claire thinks this is great. This is going to really turn things around. And Dallas gets there and has a great time, despite Luca. being very grumpy.
Not an impresario of the party in
No,
Luca. No.
no, he's a real wet blanket about this whole thing because he's saying, I am asking for more nurses and you are sending me a useless celebrity. But Dallas comes along and this is not really giving too much away, but she says, I really want to get involved with you. I want to be a celebrity ambassador. I want to give you a huge donation. And it seems like in a single stroke, Claire has saved the day.
I love that Dallas is up and coming because it contrasts with the fame of Crispin. And
Mhm.
and it adds what it does is it packs the frame with just celebrity and fame, and that this is somehow an important force in this universe. Um, yet yet it seems somehow important. Yet there's no way to track how celebrity in any way is actually helping anything, except for like I guess fleeting attention. Can you speak a bit about that? Because you talked about naming the wing and these ways that names make themselves bigger in the context of altruism. But it's a bull in a china shop a little bit.
Yes, Bull in a China Shop is correct. When I was thinking about nonprofit, especially this kind of overseas global philanthropy, it became, I mean, you can't really extricate celebrity from that. And it's very perverse, actually. But the very first time I was exposed as a pretty young child to overseas aid work was in the context of those old, I think they were World Vision infomercials
Hmm.
with Alex Trebek.
Alex
And if,
Trebek.
right.
Yeah.
And of course, I knew Alex not from charity, but from his work as a celebrity,
Yeah.
and in particular, a Canadian celebrity.
Hosting Jeopardy. All these facts. How could this be
Yes,
anything other than
yes.
perfectly on the up and up?
And if he hadn't had that persona, he wouldn't have been so successful in bringing eyeballs and fundraising. I mean, I remember watching that and literally giving my first donation because it was so emotionally compelling. And it just seems like since then, that was in the 80s, since then, the entwinement of celebrities and philanthropy have just become like the two things have become more and more entwined. And so I knew there had to be a celebrity component. And then it's not just that celebrities like Dallas, my fictional Dallas Hayden, are getting involved as spokespeople and donors. They're also, like Crispin, actually running the show. And this to me seems so backward and so perverse. And then on top of that, you have people who are very, very rich turning themselves almost into turning themselves into household names by donating money for always buildings.
Yeah.
Buildings. Could they not do it anonymously through like a just here's some money, use it how you need to? No, got to put your name on a building.
Well, that brings up another thing too. That one of the notes I made in the margin, where one of your characters makes some kind of wry observation, was then my note was all all capex, no opex, which was to say that everyone wants to spend money on building stuff.
Yes.
Everyone wants credit for erecting a building. No one wants credit for the cleaning budget that has to be spent over years. No one wants money.
Yeah.
No one wants to put their name and their money behind um uh m- you know,
Keeping the roof on.
keeping the roof on, fixing leaks, just like the ongoing upkeep, because once a building is up, nature wants it to come down and somebody else is going to pay for that part.
I think we also have to ask ourselves as people, all of us individually, why it is that we only believe something if a celebrity says it's true. Like, why are we not paying attention to what's happening in Palestine until Angelina Jolie shows up at or whoever it is at the Rafah crossing? Like, why do we need celebrities to co-sign on things before we look at them or believe them? Why do we need Alex Trebek to tell us about
Yeah.
those starving children? We knew, we should have known.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things you've spoken about was mentioned Claire's pay cut. And we'll talk a little bit how miserable Luca is. There's a lot of these personal trade-offs people make to work in this field. Um, there's this sense that you're somehow doing something so important that it offsets the sacrifice or it's worth the sacrifice. What is that personal mission seems to draw people in? Maybe it's related to their
Yeah, I think in the case of the characters in Good Guys specifically, I was thinking a lot about motivation, what was motivating them. And I was thinking about if you ask them, why are you here, Claire? Why have you taken this pay cut? She would say, it's really because it's worth it. It's worth it for me to sacrifice in order to do this good work in the world. But what she is not willing to be aware of is perhaps, and this is not giving anything away, the reader will understand this immediately, that the reason she's taking this pay cut is so that she can have the moral upper ground against her ex-husband, who really ragged on her for doing the work she used to do. And now, of course, she's able to say, well, I'm saving children and I'm doing it, I've like taken this personal sacrifice, made this personal sacrifice. And then for Anya, she is a career administrator of nonprofit and has this resume that's full of really well-known brand name charities. But she has left that all behind, probably also for a huge pay cut, to come to Children of the World. She's been there for like 10, 11, 12 years, um, and is running the show. And she could have retired by now easily, but she's there and she will say, probably she would be able to articulate this. The real reason that she is there is to leave a legacy. She's doing this because she had an embarrassing thing happen in her last job and she doesn't want to be the thing that defines her career. She wants to leave and retire after having this legacy. So even though it won't be her name on the project in Santa Rosa, like her name is not going to be up on any, building, but that project in this fictional country of Santa Rosa is really her brainchild. It's the one that she had the idea for, and then she made it happen. And her kind of big motivation through the book is to keep that place alive and to get it thriving.
that personal investment seems to be such a driving factor. Who say it's like this key motivator. It also comes to the fore in how Claire communicates with Dallas. That she's got her phone number, like she's got this direct line, and we see in parts of the book, especially when things start to go sideways, Claire really struggles to understand is we've been friendly, are we friends?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
under pressure, there's that realization that like, no, part of being famous and powerful is you can ghost people by like throwing up a wall if you had to.
You can deprioritize the relationship.
Indeed, one can find oneself suddenly deprioritized. Yeah.
Yeah, with Claire and Dallas and that relationship, I was really exploring, I guess we could call it a side quest, which is my interest in this parasocial relationship thing that happens with celebrities, but also like influencers or just people who are very much online sharing their life, and how for Claire with Dallas, not only does she see Dallas in her capacity as an actor, she also sees Dallas, who's very active on social media, sharing parts of her life in a very curated way. And Claire understands this, of course, because she's very savvy about social media. But when Dallas starts texting her privately and starts sending her pictures and videos from her own private life, Claire starts to think, oh, are we friends? I think we're friends. Oh my God, we're friends. So it's that kind of parasocial relationship at a closer degree, and I was sort of interested in having some fun with that. Poor Claire.
Poor Claire. Oh my God, poor Claire. Because there goes all of us if our favorite celebrity if were to interact with us on in socials. We'd suddenly feel very important, and we might mistake what we've got there.
Yeah, Claire's also in this moment in time in the book quite lonely. She's newly divorced, living in this kind of terrible basement apartment. She doesn't seem to have any friends.
Her husband has swept the children away to the
Yeah,
family event on the other side of the world.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, she's really got nothing. Yeah,
Yeah.
you really gave her no option, Sharon.
Well, she did have friends for a long time, but there's just too many characters in the book. I had to cut them away.
Uh, well, so there's another character I wanted to ask about. It's Emmanuel.
Yes.
She's a journalist. Tell me about Emmanuel.
So Emmanuel is the one character, the one point of view character who doesn't work at Children of the World. She's a journalist. She's from the outside. She's quite you could call it a cynical journalist. I would call it an investigative journalist with a very heightened nose for anything that stinks. And she has her own things going on, including that her career is really on the rocks, and she's really looking for a good story to bring her career back up. But she gets assigned to write a quote unquote feel good fluff piece about Children of the World and Crispin St. Ange in particular. And she comes into the story right after Dallas has turned the charity's fortunes around. So just when things are looking great for Children of the World and Claire and Luca and Anya and Crispin, in comes the troublemaker. Uh, and what I liked about Emmanuel is that she and Crispin have a lot more in common than Emmanuel would think. She comes into it expecting to dislike Crispin, expecting to find a total fool, and she's surprised by, they share a similar religious upbringing, one that they've both walked away from, but in some ways that upbringing is still baked into them. And she's a real foil for Crispin, where unlike Crispin, she is very cynical and very pessimistic. And she just starts digging in, looking for trouble.
As sharp as her pen is, Emmanuel is not a writer with the full-throated support of editorial backing here. She's a little bit
Yeah.
on a knife edge too. Tell me about the choice to place her there.
Again, it was really about stakes. How can I put all of these characters in as much peril as possible? And sometimes peril is life and death, and sometimes peril is just like your career is on the rocks, and your partner is saying, we need two salaries. And if this doesn't work out, maybe you need to leave journalism and do something else. And so, yes, she is a freelancer. She did have a column for a long time in a paper, and that got canceled due to the things that she was writing and doing. Um, and so she also comes in with a chip on her shoulder, but also she, like Claire, is financially on the edge and needs to make money, like everybody. The charity needs to make money. Uh, and Emmanuel also needs to make money. So again, in many ways, they're not dissimilar. And she is hoping that whatever she finds, whatever dirt she digs up at Children of the World, will be the thing that gives her big bylines and potentially gets her career going again. And it's
Yeah,
also a last ditch effort because there is this ultimatum on her coming from her partner that if this doesn't work out, she's got to find something else to do.
it's not lost on me that for a journalist, salvation is found in fame. Once
Yes.
once your story is big enough and you become the one who broke the story about whatever, you're a little safer. You're a little bit more New Yorker-ish. People turn to you. You're an authority.
Yeah. Everyone has a lot of ambition. Everyone is very ambitious in this book.
It's really like it's so much about the impossibility of integrity under late capitalism.
That's exactly it. It's what compromises is everyone being forced to make, and what devil's bargains are they having to make, and how it is impossible for any of them to do anything in a pure way. They might have all of these pure intentions. Even Emmanuel, her intention is, you could say, is very pure. She's just there to find out the truth.
The facts.
But she needs to make money while she does that. And if she's not making money, then she can't go looking for those things. And also, even the leads that she is able to follow are hindered by the fact of the only thing that is going to be printed is going to be something that is quote unquote newsworthy. And so there are lots of leads that perhaps she should be following that she can't.
Right, exactly. Again, it's that drive for what will get attention. If you can't get attention, you might as well not do it. Yeah.
I like that line that you draw with fame, though, because I hadn't actually thought of it that way, but it's true.
She's not a central character. She is kind of in the orbit. I'd probably put her about the same orbit as Crispin. She's important, you don't get too far inside. A little, but we don't get a lot. We don't spend too much time with her. She's a really great instrument for examining this whole thing, which makes every moment with her really precious. Why place her at the periphery? This could have been her story. We could have done this whole thing through Emmanuel.
It was not at all intentional at first. At first,
Yeah.
I was just writing, and Emmanuel actually didn't exist in the story for quite a while. She came in late, but I think it's important to have that view that could not have come from the inside.
Mm.
Um, None of like Crispin, Anya, Claire, none of them could really be truly critical about their own work. They have too much of themselves and their sense of self
Mhm.
as good people, as humanitarians tied up in what they're doing. Whereas Emmanuel, she's able to be that counter force, which is not to say that she's always right. And I think often she's um, more cynical than she needs to be, but also it's good to have that in a book, that counter force. And even Luca's cynicism, the cynicism that he has toward head office and the despairing way he thinks of head office, all of that is useful because you get to see an outside view, an insider's outside view of the way that the charity is functioning and being administered. But even he, as a lifelong aid worker, is not really able to see uh, what he and what Children of the World is doing in the way that Emmanuel can. She's very clear-eyed about it in that way. Or she's a lot more clear-eyed than they are. Let's say that. She's not totally clear-eyed, but she's a lot more clear-eyed than they are.
This book deals with serious topics, but it's very wry, or at least my reading of it was that there is a wryness about it. I think I read it kind of with an open mouth. Um,
Yeah.
there is a dry, subtle humor in it. How much of that is me just looking for dry, subtle humor and sardonic laughs?
I was definitely cackling as I
Yeah.
wrote big chunks of it.
Cackling.
Yeah.
Okay, that's more
Yeah,
than
I
an
was
open mouth
cackling.
smirk. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's that like what was interesting to me about this world, the world of the book, is the absurdity. It is very absurd that there is this washed up rock star who thinks he can thinks he knows what is best for like children in Cambodia, children in Senegal. He thinks he knows what's best and he's going to do it. Like it's completely absurd. But that is also what happens in real life all the time. These people think by value of they have a lot of money, they think they know what is best. And that the absurdity of that really struck me. Also the absurdity of just how philanthropy is enacted, how money is raised and the language, the language like we're deprioritizing a place, all that kind of workplace jargon always makes me laugh because I think it's such a crime against language, honestly. Corporate jargon is such a crime against language, which it has the potential to hurt me as a lover of language, but so I have to laugh about it.
I'm so glad we got to do an interview just like this one for Good Guys. Sharon, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nathan. This was really fun.
This is Kobo in Conversation.